Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and welcome to September's Red Alert for Anfield Index. It's been an interesting month, a mixed month, some may say, ladies and gents. Mixed results, mixed performances, but there's only one place the Reds sit, and that is top of the league as we sit here on Monday, the 30th of September. Speaking of mixed, I've got two people who sometimes they have valid points, and sometimes I suspect they probably are just smoking crack in their spare time. But we've got them anyway. So, Jamesy, Mark, how are we, gents?
Very well, thank you.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Yeah, good to hear. Lads, I like it when I do this, people, by the way, because they get a bit nervous. You've probably seen when I ask them questions they've not prepped for. But just in a word, to sort of give it a teaser, a bit of a spoiler alert for the people. September, the month, in a word. Mark.
Right.
James.
Exquisite.
We have started hard. We'll see if we keep that tempo up. And I mean, Mark, I'll come to you first of all. It's an interesting set of results. Let me call it that as I read it out. So, you look at the results for September. United away, 3-0. Forest at home, a 1-0 defeat. Milan away, a 3-1 win. Bournemouth at home, a 3-0 win. West Ham at home in the Carabao, a 5-1 victory. And we finish it the other day with Wolves away with a 2-1 victory. I mean, it's been a up and down ones. We've had an international break, all sorts of things. Overall thoughts on what you've seen in September?
Yeah, I think any month where you beat United 3-0 Old Trafford is a good month. I don't really care what comes after or before. That would have done me for the month. But I mean, aside from that, results-wise, it's been a great month. It has. We find ourselves top of the league, and City and Arsenal have had decent starts. It's not like, it's been an open goal to get there. Our results are great. 5 wins out of 6 is really, really strong. The games we've had, away to Milan, when the last pod we all talked about that, that's a very difficult place to go, and we didn't make it look that way. It was a fairly comfortable win. The cup game with a completely second string, we knocked them out of the park. 5 goals again. All the repeat of the same result last year. Fantastic. No complaints there. A comfortable win at home to Bournemouth, which again on paper looks excellent. It's exactly what you would have wanted there. Molineux Stadium, we often have. I know we win there a lot, but we struggle there. It's never easy. It's always late. It's always something. That was, as routine as it can be, I would say, overall. There were ups and downs in it, but we had a lot of chances. We could have tucked that away long before we did. And that leaves you just the one result that we didn't like in the month, Nottingham Forest, which, let's be honest, was dreadful. There's a lot of bad things to say about that game, and not just the game, lots of aspects of it, how the manager did, how certain players did, how the crowd was. The whole package wasn't right there. But if you take the results over the whole month, it's been excellent. The forwards are scoring, in bag loads. There's a genuine discussion now on the left wing of who should be playing. These two guys try to outshine each other one week and the next. Salah's been great. Loads of individuals. We'll get to that later. But loads of good things to say about the way people are playing. The only thing that the results don't really show, because I mean, ultimately, we've got the best XG in the league, the best XG against in the league. These are phenomenal things to be saying about your team early on. But I do have this sort of gut feeling that we're still a little open. Most games against, because we have to be honest, our fixtures have been favourable. I have still felt in almost every one of those games for periods of the game that we've lacked control, control's that big word, isn't it, that we've tried to use to describe Slot's team early in the process. But there are definitely spells in these games where I feel like we lack control, where if they manage to get through Szoboszlai, it looks like the whole pitch is there all of a sudden, and they're driving at the defence. McAllister and Gravenberch aren't quite sure. Not that they're not sure, they just have a lot to do, I guess. You know, they're wide, they're central. There's very hard for two men to cover that, and we found ourselves looking susceptible to the break, I've thought. That oddly hasn't translated into the XG against, which we've already covered. Ours is better than anybody else's. That hasn't been how I felt watching it, but that is the reality of what's, you know, come to pass. And there's some interesting stuff out there, and I like the idea that this is like a controlled analysis of where you can let the other team have the ball, if you will. They're getting it out wide a lot, you know, and statistically, we talked about this the other night, Dave, a lot of chances that come from out wide aren't converted the way they maybe are in other areas. But it's almost like choosing to allow possession in these areas against us, where us as fans, it can bring a little panic on, you know, because you see these attacks going down the line over and over, and you worry that you're in trouble and that they're getting prolonged periods of having the ball. But ultimately, if that is the plan, it's working. You know, we aren't conceding many. Our XG against is very strong, which, you know, put those two things together, and it seems like it's a cohesive plan rather than luck, which has been my gut, that we've been a bit lucky, you know, not to concede more or concede more chances. But, you know, that shouldn't paper over the fact that it has been a great month. We're top of the league. We've had a great first victory in the Champions League, and we've sailed through in what isn't an easy tie on paper against West Ham, especially considering we rested, you know, like it was 10 guys. So overall, very pleased. But my feeling is that the results haven't painted a completely accurate picture of how it felt week to week.
Interesting. Very interesting. I mean, Jamesy, you're Mr. Uber positive, and Mark started that way, and then his old habits got to him, didn't he? He just brought us down a little bit. Can you bring us back on track with a little happier music, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you started with Nottingham Forest and straight away losing 1-0 and being at home, and, you know, the tabloids come out and you had the journals coming out and this is Slot's demise and all the rest. And then we go to Milan and we win 3-1. And, you know, you're not talking like you're talking a European royalty. Great game, fantastic. Salah hit the post twice, if you remember right, which was phenomenal. And again, just a really cohesive unit as well. When you take into consideration Van Dijk and Kanate scored from those set pieces, is something that, you know, to win the league or to go far in Europe, you do need your defenders, you do need your set pieces, and for them to get on the end of that, it was just brilliant to see. The thing, like, obviously, we've talked about this at length. We definitely need to think about a left back, because Tsimikas, like, you know, he was running with his head off for that goal against Milan. That's what I would say. And then with Slot, you take the Bournemouth game and 3-0, and how fantastic was Diaz. And there's something changed in relation to how he can time his acceleration. So how he stays and then how he can accelerate. There's something very different than how he plays this year compared to Slot. And it's fantastic to see. Then again, you know, think about Nunez's goal. I mean, I'm just so happy for him, because that could have hit the post and just went away. And then we would be discussing going, oh, you know, Nunez has missed another chance. However, that goal. And again, you know, the work rate that we hit, that we flick, and away went Nunez, and just to cut in and that curler, wow, just it shows you what he has in his locker. More confident, more playing. You know, I'm a big Nunez fan anyway.
And so, yeah, it's showing very quickly.
Yeah.
But the third thing you've managed to mention about Nunez.
Then you got obviously the 5-1, and again, you know, a controlled performance against West Ham, like 5-1 against a Premiership team, regardless if it's second string, if they take out second string, if we take out second string, it's a big performance. And to beat someone 5-1, no matter who it is, it was just great to see. And then to finish that off, Excuse me, I've got a wee bit of a cold. To finish that off, we've got the Wolves game. Now, again, going to Molyneux, there's many a times that we could have drew that game, we could have even lost it. We stuck in and we hit that 2-1. And again, it's just a full circle. And now we're going into November feeling like, right, let's go. And again, it's that momentum that takes us forward.
Well, I think October might have something to say about that, but I get the sentiments completely, James. I do like the positivity in that regard. It is weird, isn't it? It's like I maybe sit somewhere between you because Jamesy, I get what you're saying. You can look at like the rebirth of Luis Diaz, like all these players who are coming back. But we'll get into players a bit more. But there's so many who probably exceeded expectations already. We are 8 games in, so we have got a real sample size, as we call it now, wouldn't we? At the same time, and I get what you're saying, Mark. On paper, you wouldn't have picked a much different start. I get that, no doubts about it at all. But there is the old classic saying that you could only beat what's in front of you, innit? The fixture list is the fixture list in that regard. And I know people will say there is tougher tests to come, which we'll get on to as well. The control aspect is strange at times because at times, if it just on your eye test, you think we're so calm, we're so controlled, and you've seen that at home, haven't you? Like you mentioned Bournemouth, Jamesy, we're like, we are regimented in that game, or like even Brentford last month, I thought a little bit, we were so controlled. And yeah, I still agree with you at times, Bart. There is times where when Szoboszlai goes up in that 4-2-4, if you bypass him, you're like, holy shit, they're just advancing on those full pelt. And, we do see easy to play on at times.
There with Wolves, Lamina did it like 3 times in the game, just because he's a good runner himself. Lamina just manages to get through Szoboszlai, be it by pace or skill or whatever. And then you just panic, don't you? You look around and you think, who's getting there? Who's closing that?
Yeah, and it's a weird one because that, like I said, that's the eye test, and I get that completely. And yet, like as some of the up boys, to be fair, have been putting out, Dan Kennett put this out on his thread yesterday. He said, Slot so far is putting up serious numbers across the 8 games, particularly on the defensive side. We're still only conceding a shot every 17 minutes when the game is tied. And the value of these is tiny, just 0.4 XG, and only 2 up to big chances when the game is tied. If what they're saying, and they talk about it a lot as people know, garbage time, as in when we're already ahead, or maybe, when it's like 2-0 or 3-0 Old Trafford, that's when we give the chances up. And I kind of get that to an extent. I think, yeah, that does back what my eyes are telling me a lot. But there is still just that little niggling, like we could just tighten up a bit at times, couldn't we? We are still, I don't know, feels like we're relying on maybe a brilliant Van Dijk block or like Canate. Do you remember Canate blocks that shot from Forbes at the end against Wolves? It's sometimes just that little bit of brilliance. And don't get me wrong, all the top teams need brilliance. You need Van Dijk, Canate, Alisson to bail you out at times as well. That's going to happen. That happens for every top team. But yeah, control, yes. Maybe, I don't know, tighten up. Maybe we have to see what happens. And I mean, Jamesy, I've ran through a fair few players and we've brought some in already. I'll do it a bit differently because normally we go straight for who's the best player, don't we? Or who's your sort of main man for September. But I think it's right we sort of talk up a few. And I know you won't sort of object to being positive for a few. So talk me up a few of your standouts before you get to your main man for September.
Diaz, I think he's been scintillating. That's someone that we're going to put up there. Also, I think McAllister as well, very consistent through all his performances. He's very cute with the ball. He breaks up play. He moves forward. He can come back. He can defend. I mean, that's someone as well. Then you've got Canate as well. I mean, he is just an absolute beast. Like the attackers must just look at him going, "Oh no, here I go." Because the way that he can jockey and the way he can push out wider, he can bring it in and his slide tackles and his clearances and his vision, like that vision for the ball over the top against Bournemouth, that was unbelievable. And yes, you could just say that was just a clearance, but just to be able to look up and just to see Diaz running and to put that on was just great. And then Gravenberch would be the second one that I would talk about, like just again, great. I mean, in that number 6 role, we had all those like, oh, who's going to play number 6 and Superman Day, but in relation to is turning and his vision and his passing and his accuracy as well. It's a breath of fresh air. But who I'm giving it to for the month of September is Van Dijk. He's just imperial. Everything about him. Just fantastic partnership with him and Kanate, and he just purrs like a Rolls Royce.
Like it. I'm pretty sure you meant imperious, unless you are saying Virgil van Dijk does work for the, in Star Wars, but that's a different thing. But I like it. Imperious, Virgil van Dijk. Mark?
I did say imperial. It's just an Irish accent. Get used to it.
We'll talk the performance, not the mince eggs. So, Mark, what about for you? Standout player and players? Because he's right to talk up a few this month.
Yeah, I mean, the only one that James didn't mention that I would mention would be Salah as well, for obvious reasons. He's just there tucking those numbers away as he does week in, week out. Key moments in key games too. He's getting big goals when we need them. I didn't think he was as good there at Molineux, but aside from that, I thought he had a fantastic month. Just brilliant. His stuff on the ball seems to just get better month by month, year by year. It's as the legs go, the vision seems to improve, and his impact doesn't lessen, even with less of the impactful runs and the things that we kind of knew him for in his early Liverpool days, which is just a really cool thing to be watching unfold. Sometimes horrible watching the stars decline as we have to do pretty much, with any of them. And this guy has decided to go another way with it and just be brilliant in a different way, which is really, really cool. And in a similar vein, I agree about Van Dijk. He's just choosing not to age. He's just choosing to be exactly as good as he's always been. Relentlessly. Unbelievable month from him. I saw it written a lot this week that we don't talk about it enough, and we don't talk about it enough because he's not even getting mentioned at the end of these games. These are flawless performances. Flawless. The one the other night, it's a joke. And, you've got Gravenberch and Kanate arguing over man of the match at the end of the game. And Van Dijk's just in there thinking, well, we all know it was me again, don't we? But to be honest, I would, despite saying those great things about those guys, and I totally agree about Diaz, and Gakpo gets an honourable mention for his smaller performance, smaller opportunities but very impactful performances. The one for me is Gravenberch. He's continuing to surprise me week on week. I keep thinking the cracks that we saw last season, the kind of weakness in his mentality, maybe his demeanor, is the flaws in his choices that we saw last season at times. I keep expecting to see them again, and there's just no sign of it. He looks a changed player. He looks reborn. He looks so comfortable on the ball, taking it on the turn. Some of the times he's choosing to take it on the turn, and the confidence the centre-backs have got in hitting him with it hard when there's a lot around him, knowing that he has the picture. I love that. Under pressure, taking the press on the centre-backs, and he is the outlet. They can feed it into him, and he either plays it out wide or he takes it and he turns, and he's got that running power to just leave people behind. It's a pleasure to watch. I think Gravenberch is what United thought Pogba was going to be. He's that kind of runner. His awareness, his technical quality, his running power is just. I think he's great. He's completely shocked me this season, and he gets my player of the month.
It's such a weird month in a way that, Forest, and bear in mind, pretty much everyone was terrible, bar a few pass marks, as we said before, but everyone pretty much has had real purple patches, haven't they? Like James, you said, Diaz, he's had some great games, some really important goals. All forwards are contributing, which is brilliant, isn't it? We've got 6 forwards and everyone's getting goal contributions in this one. That is brilliant to say, and that will usually stand you in good stead, because even if you don't quite play well, if you can just stick it in the net at times, as we know, that's how things work. I think of that Wolves game. Jota was horrific in that game at times. He couldn't even just pass it or do the basic to control, could he? And then he bends a beautiful ball in for the left for Kanate's opener. Then he spins and gets a penalty, just 2 goal contributions. So if your forwards are firing, that's it. As you said, Gravenberch, sensational. I think we're 8 games in now, so we can't just say I don't know when you can say it's a flash in the pan or when you stop saying those types of things, but we're 8 in now, so it's not just like a one-off thing as well. But to what you said, Jamesy, this man here, I mean, I think you were spot on, Mark. We're having a laugh at young Ibu, Grav having a good laugh in the interview. But you're right. Everyone's like, well, really, Van Dijk's probably just sat in the changing room going, I was man of the match. Let's not lie. But I'll just not say anything because I'm the captain, the leader, and I need everyone around me to just, lift themselves up a bit as well. But the only thing I would say when I give it to him is there's probably just a few dipped in other performances. What I mean by that is Konate's sensational, but he is partly at fault for that Wolves goal, isn't he, along with Alisson. So there's just, you're splitting hairs, but Van Dijk, and for me, I would agree. But I've loved that we're talking about a month where we didn't always have it in the last season. Sometimes it was 1 and 2 covered the other 9, if that makes sense, and they were lifting them up. Now, lads, we are genuinely talking about the 7, 8 players even who are really playing well. That is a massive, massive positive. There's no two ways about it. And, I mean, we've got to start talking about, Mark, Arne Slot. We've got a sample size. We've got 8 games. We've got September. I'm going to be honest. It's early doors, and like you said before, there's fixtures to come that'll be tougher. I'm liking a lot of what I'm seeing about Arne Slot so far. How's he done in September?
Yeah, I don't want to I don't want to like make big statements about him because of the kind of games we've had are ones you would expect us to win and stuff. But I don't want to be come the end of November or whatever thinking the last 2 months weren't very good, and we thought we were there, we thought we had the guy, and it's turned out when the harder games came, we didn't have the guy or whatever. But what I will say is that, and I'll exclude Forrest because I'll come to that at the end. But excluding Forrest, he's barely put a foot wrong. I mean, tactically, like we kind of went on to in the earlier part of the pod, it looks like calculated risk is being taken. The bits that we're worried about, the only bit that's failing the eye test seems to be deliberate. I don't know if that is going to turn out to be true, but it seems to be. It seems too obvious a thing to be going wrong that is continually going wrong, that it kind of has to be part of the plan. Szoboszlai is playing so high that it's obvious, that when you get through him, that's where you are. It's calculated that winning it back that high is worth the risk of them getting it, and it going wide. And if the numbers continue to be as successful as they have been up to now, we just can't argue with that. We really can't. On a kind of personal level, we did this last month too, talking about kind of what we thought so far. And I had mentioned my kind of worries around the way he was treating Trent or Gomez. Just a few of these early things had kind of kicked up. It's been a much quieter month in that regard. There's been no real flare-ups, which is very positive because, there's the contract stuff. There was the really bad performance in Forest, and he's managed not to get tangled in anything, which I genuinely was a little bit worried about that early doors because I was thinking you've tangled twice in your first month. Are you just like trying to show people you're no pushover, or is this a little like personality trait? Like say Mourinho, for example, right? He goes through his whole career and he can never stay out of controversy with individual players. Always someone falling out, always losing a player from the dressing room. And, we had our last manager was a god at that kind of stuff. He somehow managed to keep everybody on side and fighting together, and even the ones not playing. So that was a real concern, and he's alleviated that to a fair level, I would say, this month. Because like I say, there were ups and downs, and he managed to navigate all those waters without any trouble. And I also think he's kind of likable too. I like his kind of to the point nature. I like his directness. He doesn't beat around the bush. Doesn't give too much away tactically, while also kind of getting his point across in a way that we all understand and agree with him. He's very sharp and to the point. He makes sure he's understood and that the questions were clear. He asked for clarification where it should be and make sure he isn't going to get misquoted. He's careful as well as being direct. I think. I mean, how can he not be pleased with the start he's made? It's. I'm pretty sure if he had been really honest with himself, bedding into a new team where they hadn't got him the key players that he wanted ultimately in the window. If he'd sat down and worked out the results and where they would be, we must be ahead of schedule, I would think, in his plan. I know they weren't the hardest games, but you can't just sit down and write win, 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 win. On all of them, it's just unrealistic. If you're anyone but the Klopp and Pep sides of a few years back.
Yeah, it will be positive. Jamesy, I know you say this in our chat all the time. Maybe I'm going strong. You love Arnie Slot, don't you? Be honest.
Yeah. I love him. I mean, obviously getting beat by Nottingham Forest, it was a reality check. And, could you potentially make excuses there? Yes. I mean, you've got a lot of international minutes in a lot of the players, 180, like that's what you're talking. So there's a lot of stuff that happens that way. But when you take into consideration, like, for example, you said this already, Mark, that they've managed to keep up our XG, the attacking, whilst virtually halving the XG defending, like goals. When it comes to possession, we're 58% possession, while Klopp was 60 possession. And the thing is, why it's not 60% is because of the United game, we were only 47. So even though we've got a small sample size, we're definitely going in the right direction. And I know it's a small sample size, but exactly, thinking about what we have done this season so far, I guess Slot's just in dreamland. But a caveat of that is, and the thing I'll have to kind of point out is, the thing that worries me is the low block, okay? Playing teams that are low block and they have fast wingers and maybe a big centre forward. That's what worries me. And that's the hope that Klopp has seen that if you have a bad day in the Premiership, you will get punished. That's how simple it is. No matter whoever's at the bottom of the table and you're at the top of the league, if you have a bad day, you will get punished. And that's what Arnie Slot found out against Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, I meant to wind back to the Forest game at the end of my kind of assessment of his month, because if there is a worry, it wasn't the result at Forest that was worrying. It was the way he went about it, really. Dave, you and I were sitting at the game together, and you called it pretty early that the shape had gone, essentially. And he basically kind of rolled the dice and just threw forwards at it, and we lost shape. We lost a game plan completely. I genuinely think he underestimated the Premier League overall, and it's one of those things where you know it's the most competitive league, but until you see it, Klopp did this too early on. It's a mistake you see foreign managers do all the time when they come to the league. They don't realise just that, like James just said, that anybody can beat anybody, and they do beat anybody. Yeah. And if you take just 2% off your level, that's enough. And I think his approach in the kind of, it was actually before Forest scored. It was just chasing the win when he started making the subs. But I think he thought you can just throw players at it, throw more attackers at it, and the quality will shine through. And I think, I'm pretty sure he's learned the lesson there. And I like to think next time we get a deep block like we faced that day, that he'll behave differently, because not only did the subs not work, we got significantly worse after the subs. We didn't create any real chances. We didn't look very threatening, and the game basically petered out. I mean, with about 5 to go, I didn't have any hope myself, and you could hear it in the crowd that there wasn't that kind of, we can do that. Sometimes Anfield just lifts in those final 10 minutes, and you feel it happening before it happens, and it's kind of chicken and egg. Are we up in them? Are they doing it to us? Because it usually happens kind of together, and neither happened in that game, and I think that one was down to him, really.
Yeah, it is a weird one. I won't say too much on Forest, because I think Forest is, I never thought we'd be talking about Nottingham Forest so much on the Liverpool podcast ever, but we have this season just because of that one result. It is the big question mark, and it is the big question mark, which we'll come on to for October. Is it a blip, or is it a one-off? My hope is a little bit like you said, that he's taken the lessons from that a little bit, like every game will be tough. He'll also point towards the fact, well, none of my players could pass to each other, so what do you want me to do about that a little bit? I'll take that into consideration. But it's whether it's a one-off, it's a blip, and how much has he learned from that? That'll be the big one. So just a couple of, we'll just do one more question, I suppose, for James, for the month of September. The one thing that's been consistent, James, in September, that midfield three. Gravenberch, McAllister, almost did a double pivot, if you want to call it that, haven't they? Almost like alternating six at times, as Slots described it. So Bosley a little bit higher, but it's been that three. There's no doubts about it. You were quite positive so far in the way you've talked about them, James. You definitely bigged up Gravenberch, you definitely bigged up McAllister. Didn't quite big up Bosley as much when you talked briefly about him. What are you seeing on Bosley for September?
I think all the attributes are there. I think he's great pressing. I think he's great technical footballer, but it's just those moments that he maybe makes the wrong decision. I would like to see him getting forward. Yes, he scored a great goal, but I'd like to see him getting forward because he has a hell of a shot there as well. I'd like to see him putting the foot in. I don't see him putting the foot in as much as he could. He nearly stands away. He doesn't actually get involved. He's quite a flair player. But, I'm very much about Gravenberch and I'm very much about McAllister. So Bosley, I'm just a little bit on the fence in relation to what they're going to do with Szoboszlai. And obviously, if we get a number 6, then again, that's going to be it's going to be questions going to ask, how's that going to work? Is it going to be the Szoboszlai is going to go, he's going to be back up and McAllister is going to be the 10? And so we'll just see what's going to happen that way. It's interesting. Like Dave, I'm not going to give up on him. I think that he's a fantastic player. He's the fastest player in Liverpool. He's great strength. He just has to learn how to use his body a bit more and not actually like pussy out of a challenge. Like get in there and actually tackle. I think he's quite wet. Made a good point last season. Gakpo was very underweight, but then he's kind of beefed up and now he can actually hold the ball and shield the ball. And I'm hoping the Szoboszlai that they can actually do a little bit about Szoboszlai, because I think he's a great attribute in the way that he plays. It's something very different. It's legs in that midfield. He run all day, which is great to see. But again, it's just a couple of those final products, and that awareness is not great. Can it be coached is going to be the big question asked as well.
Interesting. So he's a real mixed one, Mark, says Szoboszlai. However, I've got to ask you about Szoboszlai because I've seen some of your reactions to Dominic Szoboszlai's performance, and sometimes it's like as dramatic as a 14-year-old girl that can't find a favourite lip gloss type of thing. So you are not high on Dominic Szoboszlai, are you?
No, I'm not. And that comes from a position of loving him at the start of last season and, really thinking we had found that thing we hadn't really had since we had, Stevie and kind of dynamic, powerful midfielder with technique, coming out as wazoo. But he tailed off at the end of last season. Clearly kind of fell out of favour and then gets this new start this season as a 10. Very different thing he's being asked to do. We've touched on it already that he's pressing super high and he's almost the furthest guy forward in the press at times. He's covering great ground. I think he is pretty critical in the way we are choosing to play. Again, we've talked about this a lot on this pod about, the choices we're making in the press and the trying to regain possession high up the field the same way, we kind of did before. But more so with like a 4 on their own than the way it was under club where, it felt like a kind of organised team movement thing. The 4 really try and catch it early. And then the 2 defensive midfielders or the pivot have to adjust from that, and see where play heads and try and fill those spaces. So, I mean, that part of his game has been undeniably good. You can't criticise the amount of ground he's covering and how he's helping the defensive side of the forward line. Brilliant. But unfortunately for me, that's just nowhere near enough. I mean, he's got no willingness to take the ball in the turn the way we were praising Gravenberch for doing it. He almost instinctively passes it directly back in the direction it came to the same man that got it without ever checking over his shoulder, without ever making any attempt to, feel for the defender pressing him, the kind of classic things people do. And my feeling around that is that he's doing that because he doesn't have the awareness. He doesn't seem to have the picture. He's never firing off quick balls round corners. He's never taking the ball on the turn himself. He's even neglected to take on shots this season, which I just think is ridiculous for a guy of his technical abilities. I mean, he'll be aware that things aren't going particularly well for him this season. I'm sure he's felt that pressure. So to not be trying to do the thing that he's so clearly brilliant at, I'm dumbfounded by it. There's been at least 4 or 5 times this season where it's there for him to just let go on that right boot, and he's chose not to, and ultimately done not very much with the other option he takes. He doesn't make good decisions for me. I haven't seeing the attributes of a number 10 in him. I'm not. If you only want a guy up there pressing, fine, he's your guy. But for me, you want more creativity. You want a guy who can, pick the lock up there or take the shot on or whatever. The only time I think he contributes in an offensive way is when he overlaps, when he does something kind of beyond Salah, which creates space. And ultimately, it's his running doing that again. It's not actually quality on the ball or any meaningful pass or shot. So I've been really disappointed with him ultimately this season. Not just offensively. At times when, although his running's good, he's not using his body the way he should. He's got a great stature of a guy, so quick, and manages to get the run on guys umpteen times and then just chooses not to kind of throw the shoulder or just do that little extra thing that he really needs to do. I like what James said about Gakpo, because the comparison's quite true. Last season, Gakpo was doing a lot of that too, not using that clearly good frame of his to put himself about a little bit and just dominate people. Football's a lot of that, just winning your battle with the guy you're right up against. Be more dominant than him. Kanate and Van Dijk are great examples of it. They just never get beat in their 1v1s. And Szoboszlai, he looks like Gerrard at times the way he runs, but he doesn't play like him. He doesn't throw himself around like him. Doesn't take that kind of personal pride in just winning his 1v1 battles. He seems kind of happy to run alongside guys instead of just gritting his teeth a little and going for it. So I think this was well covered, and this has been a month of really good performances almost across the board. And you could maybe pick out Robertson at left back as a guy who struggled, but the other one for me would definitely be Szoboszlai.
It's weird. It's an overall context, and context is everything in this for me. But you kind of mentioned it a little bit there, I thought, Mark, at the start. I think he is quite crucial to the way we play Szoboszlai. I think that running power, the press, is such distinct. And by the way, I think in his defence, no one else has got that sort of in our squad. And I know people have talked about it a little bit, that if Harvey Elliott was fit, he would have been the alternate. And I get that. I know you've said that in our chat before, James. The one thing is, if you've got McAllister and Harvey Elliott in that midfield three, there is really fuck all running power, if you know what I mean. You are relying on Gravenberch a lot there. So it's a big strength, his athleticism and all round. And as much as you said it's the press, I think the other thing that gets ignored a lot, how many times when it's a break from the other side do we see Szoboszlai as the covering rub? When they're breaking the other team, he's the one that's tracking back. But he does have that. He does cover back a lot. It's weird. I sometimes look at him at the moment and think he's being asked to play a bit higher. It's definitely not an 8. It's more of a 10. Maybe not quite a 10 in the pocket, but more of a 10. And yet all his best attributes seem to be around running, doesn't it? But we see we've seen good things. We've seen a couple of assists. I think you both said it there. It's just decision making at times, isn't it? He gets in the right position, or he gets in the good position, pull the trigger, make a simple pass. I think the one thing we talk about with Szoboszlai is the picture of the month, if anyone was to get on his back, would be, do you remember there's that break against Forest where he's got it and there's 4 options to pick from, like bombing, and he just puts it straight to a Forest defender, and that was kind of symbolic of that game. And he wasn't that much better against Wolves, but overall, I think they do come as a bit of a collective. I think the strengths of each negate the others a little bit as well. I think it's fair to say the smarts, the physicality. I almost treat them as a collective. So I do think sounds weird, but his powers in there are important to make the collective function, I think. And I just wonder, without, like, say, and this is just sounding derogatory, he's not even played, for God's sake, but if it was, say, Harvey Elliott, and maybe people will think Curtis Jones, I just think there's something lost with Alba Szoboszlai. But get his decision-making right, I think that will improve a lot of things. Cool. Final question on September. Give it a score out of 10. Mark.
I mean, you've got to think about that United result when you do this. You know, you can't forget my entire childhood of watching us struggle against them, and only one bad result in the whole month. I'm gonna go high. I'm gonna give it an 8.5.
Like it, James C.
Yeah, I was going to say 8, but an 8.5 is pretty, that's a good assessment. And the reason being, be able to come back from Forest, how low you would have felt, and to be able to go to Milan and win 3-1, that's my 8.5 right there.
Crazy, isn't it? It's how the fuck we're talking so much about Nottingham Forest, which would have made it a 10 out of 10. It's insane.
Yeah, it would have been, really. You're right. Yeah, that's the only blip. 10 out of 10 with that one. But I think James' point is a good one. I mean, the narrative did change after the Forest game, you know, and there was a lot of we've been found out, all that usual rhetoric, and not just the Milan game, the rest of the month put that to bed completely. And the next defeat we have, you know, whenever that may come, I think he'll avoid that, they've been found out chat by how he put this one to bed. Very important. You know, it was one of Klopp's best skills too. A defeat usually was just a standalone result and followed by, you know, back to business kind of stuff. And it feels that way on this lot. I've been really, really impressed with that.
Yeah, it has been impressive. I'd probably think 8.5. Maybe I'd go 9, which is weird because I'm being the most positive. But high scores all round, we will take it. And we'll move into the month that James chose to forget, which is October coming up. So, I mean, look at these fixtures. Bologna at home, Palace away, an international break, followed by Chelsea at home, Red Bull Leipzig away, Arsenal away, and the Carabao Cup, Brighton away. I mean, there's some tough games in that one, Mark, but you're going to have to put your neck on the line for these. We never get a full house anyway of predictions, but we like a go, don't we? So what are you giving it for October's predictions?
Yeah, that's a really hard month. That's the hardest month we will have had this season so far, no doubt about that. Some really big tests. I think I'll just do it in order with Bologna coming up first at home. I would expect us to win that. And actually, I think it's quite a big one to win. We've got a few difficult games coming in the Champions League. To get Bologna and AC out of the way with a win each, that'll stand us in great stead going forward. Not too many more results needed after that. Palace away. Since that one in 13-14, I'd never ever like going there. I'm always fearful of going to Palace. Even though we tend to do quite well there, it's just I have that lingering pain still from the 3-0 to 3-3. So I'm gonna give us a draw in that one. Actually, I think it's unrealistic to, you know, just start totting up W's on every single game. You have to imagine there are going to be drop points, and even City and Arsenal look capable of it this year. I think it's going to be more of that kind of season than we have seen in the previous almost 5 or 6 years, really, from the top teams. Chelsea comes after the break, and I think we'll win that one. Chelsea have been a bit resurgent. They do look a tougher prospect now than they have done for years, really, if we're honest. Cole Palmer, obviously, serious talent that we'll have to keep a hold on, but I feel like that'll be a big Anfield performance. I think we'll turn up for that one. I think we'll end up winning that one well. Leipzig away next. I think we should just have too much for them, if I'm honest. I think we'll just be too good for them, even with what might be almost a second string for us. You know, I'm sure there'll be changes there. I still think we'll go and win that one. Toughest test of the month is after that. It's away at Arsenal. I think there's a good argument that that's maybe the hardest game of the season. I think they're, people might think that's mad when the Etihad's out there, obviously, but I have really not enjoyed our last couple of times in the league at Arsenal. I've felt like they've dominated us more than I've seen us dominated by anybody else in Europe in those particular games. And I'm not even sure why that is, particularly because City are on a better side than them. There's no doubt about that. But I just really didn't enjoy the control. I know we won in the cup there, but in the league, I felt like they just swatted us. And I'm fearful they're going to do the same to us there. So I've got us losing that one. And then it's the cup tie. Is that away at Brighton, that one? I think we'll win that. Yeah, I think we'll go second string again, and I think we'll win that one.
Woofed. Some proper ups and downs predicted by Mark this month. Jamesy, are you going to try and lift it again after Mark's negativity?
No, I think that was a fair estimation. Like, Bologna, I think will win definitely, and that at Palace, I just think it's a draw. And then after international break, I think we draw with Chelsea. We'll beat Leipzig. I think we'll get beat by Arsenal. I just think that it's just, as you're saying, it's that tough game, and then we'll win against Brighton.
You've got a more pessimistic view than me. That is unusual.
It's just how everything's kind of fallen, and the games as well. Like Leipzig, Arsenal, and Brighton.
That'll just be 2 points from 9 in the league by your estimation. We won't be top anymore.
Yeah, but there's a lot to, and again, it's unfortunately it's the games are coming thick and fast, and again, Palace and Chelsea, another 2 tests.
I can't believe what I'm hearing, James. You're normally the cheery one of the bunch.
Yeah.
You do like life coaching and stuff like that, trying to boost people up. Like, what are you going to start saying tomorrow? Like, don't bother, Linda. You're never going to fit into Lycra. Just give it up on type of thing. Like, you're supposed to be everyone on this. So, well, it falls to me a little bit, I suppose, then, doesn't it? So, Bologna, this is proper greedy stuff. I don't think this will be that difficult. They're 14th, I think, in Serie A. They're struggling.
Right, yeah.
They've sold a lot of the best players. I wouldn't even be too sad about a fair bit of rotation for this one. I think we do think we'll win this. So I'm quite looking forward to that. That hopefully not famous last words. Palace is a difficult place to go. They're really not in a good moment, though, if you've looked at the table. It's one of those. And also the thing that I know this is strange to say, but I like on this. Palace, they've always got that fucker who's banging a drum and going, Palace, Palace, blah, 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 like making all the noise. It is a 12:30 kickoff, so maybe he's just got a hangover or in bed a little bit, but sometimes a tough away at 12:30 isn't the worst thing, is it? Like their fans aren't quite fully up for it, and they're not the best in the league. So I think we'll win that. I think we'll sneak it just before the international break. Here's the interesting one for me. Chelsea. It's interesting that both of you were like, yeah, we'll win that. Do you remember we talked about the Nottingham Forest question mark in terms of after the international break? That's why there's a bit of an asterisk by Chelsea for me. It's after the international break. How do we get on? Has Slot learned the lessons in terms of, a team like that? And maybe Chelsea will come out, and you're right, maybe they will. The crowd be up for it because of who it is and how much we hate them. It will just be a big question mark for me. Leipzig, the way I think we'll draw. I think just because you'll have your eye in that Chelsea, Arsenal sandwich coming up, if you know what I mean. That'll be the thing. I wouldn't be surprised to see a bit of rotation for Leipzig ahead of Arsenal away. And this is not to sound defeatist at all, but it's better than these two. I'd probably shake hand on a point at the Emirates right now. To be honest, it is a difficult stadium for us. I agree with that.
I didn't shake your hand for the point.
Yeah, I'd shake a lot of things for a point at the Emirates right now. Yeah, I would take that trade. And this also sounds bad. You want to win every game we play, but you've got to admit, gents, Brighton away. These Carabao Cup games are not getting any easier. Do you know what I mean? And it's just another game on the schedule each time. So I'm never going to say I want Liverpool to lose games because that's too strong, but I wouldn't be distraught, put it that way, if we didn't go through or a second string went out. That's not the worst thing in history for us by any means, is it? So I'll probably ask you this one.
You've got us winning one game. He's got us winning hardly any. You've got us winning one. Well, just not bother watching any of this one.
Say, that's probably why James just jumped to November last time, didn't it? Maybe. Gonna get absolutely fuck all viewers for October, aren't we, at this rate? But we'll see. We'll see. I mean, it seems pretty unanimous. I suspect I'll come to both of you for this. Most nervous about Jamesy. Even you were pretty defeatist about the Emirates there.
Yeah, Arsenal. Yeah, like just that's the most nervous of all. Yeah, Arsenal. I do honestly think we'll get beat. Again, there's nothing more I can say about that.
Christ, Mark.
Yeah, I'm not nervous at all about Arsenal because it is somewhat of a free hit for me. You know, there's 2 games of the season, you know, the away to City and away to Arsenal, the hardest 2, and they're somewhat of a free hit in my view. You know, if you lose there, it really isn't a disaster to lose to those guys. I'll expect to beat them or take points off them, certainly at Anfield. So I'm not that nervous about it. I would say the Chelsea game I am nervous about because I expect to see something there. I want to see us win that one. That one would be sorer to lose in a lot of ways than the Arsenal one because, it's at Anfield, a team that we consider ourselves to be better than. If we don't come out with 3 points from there, I'll be disappointed with that. So if you say, if the question was which one do you think we're most likely to lose, it's Arsenal. But the question is, which are you most nervous about? I'm most nervous about Chelsea.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. If you look at, there's only actually 3 league games amongst it all, aren't there? Yeah. Palace, Chelsea, and Arsenal. I think if someone said you get 6 points, I think we'd say that's not bad. Probably That's what we look for from the first 2. Probably lose that Arsenal, however, combination. If you get anything more than 6 points, I think that's a very good month in the league. That's important to say. Yeah. Nervous, that's why for me, I am just Chelsea, just because, like Forest, it's after that international break. Chelsea are in form, you have to say that as well a little bit. Again, they'll have the international break, but Chelsea have got about 86,000 players to rotate, haven't they, at the same time as well? So that does work in their favour a little bit over us, so we will have to see. Yeah. Christ, please join us for October, despite how fucking pessimistic we are. So maybe we'll see if we keep on this theme for pessimism. Contracts for the big 3. We said September. We'd hoped to hear news. And we heard fuck all. That is where we are on these contracts. I mean, Mark, you weren't despondent. That would be too strong. But you weren't ecstatic at the same time. Confidence-wise on these 3, I'm almost dreading asking you this.
Yeah, not a huge amount has changed for me. I expect, when we were talking about it a month ago, I thought I would feel differently than I feel now. I don't feel like we've lost our chance of signing them particularly. I don't feel like we've got any closer to signing them. I'm much the same as I was before. I do wonder why nothing's happening. It's really is quite hard to understand why they're not striking while the iron's hot or whatever. The club are playing quite well. If there was any question of the players wanting to see where the project was going, because they're all, well, certainly 2 of them are in the twilight of their career. If they wanted to see if this was, the place to spend their final years, I think the question's been answered as best as it can be for now. If I was Edwards or whatever, I'd be thinking like, right, I'll sneak that contract in now while they think it's all good, just in case it isn't good at the end of October, And if our predictions are to go by, this is the week to get them signed. And as for Trent, I mean, I said last month I don't think he'll sign because I don't believe for a second that they haven't approached Trent. He hasn't said that they haven't. I don't understand why they wouldn't have. It doesn't make any sense that a guy at his age bracket, there are no question marks around that one. They must have had conversations. They must have. the silence had been very deafening around that one. Obviously, he's chosen to speak up now. You can kind of make of that what you will, really. That every person will give you a different answer on that, because what he said wasn't particularly positive, but he did also choose to speak. So there's, was he trying to push them in one direction or the other? That would probably be my guess. I mean, what possible advantage is there of him coming out and, saying things about winning trophies and whatnot, and suggesting that he maybe wouldn't sign on, other than to kind of kick them into gear, in what they're willing to offer, or how quickly they're willing to offer it, or length, or whatever the hold up is with that. Because the big thing with Trent is that he's not going to be treated the same way as the other two should it go that way. That he's going to go down on a very small list of guys who have fucked the club over, essentially, and he'll probably never come back from it if he does choose to do that. The same way McManaman's not loved the way he so clearly would have been. He was a hero of mine when I first started supporting Liverpool, and just don't have any love for him at all anymore. And I think Trent will find himself in that bracket if he chooses to go for nothing. He'll be aware of that. He's no fool. He lives in the city. I'm sure he'll end up in the city after football's done for him. So I would think if he is considering not signing the deal, he's doing it kind of knowingly. He's already weighing it up, that it's just worth it to go to Madrid, let's say, and win all those trophies. And if I have to come back and not be loved by Liverpool fans, so be it, kind of thing. I wouldn't say I'm less confident of the deal because I didn't think he was going to sign it in the first place. I would say, if anything, on the Trent one, him speaking has maybe made me just a tiny bit more optimistic that he's trying to push it in the direction of a contract rather than soften us up for the inevitable blow of him not signing it and leaving.
Yeah, it is a weird one. Jamesy, you tend to be quite positive about these things, but we really haven't, aside from Trent's comments and him stopping in the mix zone, and him stopping, it's important to say, and giving those comments rather than, being asked or approached. He stops and chooses that. What are you thinking about these three at the moment?
I'm thinking they're enjoying their football. And when you enjoy your football, and he's come out and he says he's enjoying the way that he's getting to play with Slot, and whatever you want to take from that, and then obviously he wants to be the future captain. If you want to take stuff from that, what does that mean with BVD at the moment? Because that's like Chinese whispers in itself. But I honestly do. I can't see it going any other way. Maybe that's just me, my red tinted glasses, and me being the positive person I am. I do think the three of them is going to sign. It just takes a little bit more time. It is happening. It's complex. They're negotiating at the moment. They're doing it behind doors. And again, Trent coming out and giving you a glimpse. But again, you're taking what you want from it. So that's my opinion on it.
Yeah, it is funny, isn't it? Because probably like you guys, you see it. You see the Trent comments, or you read the Trent comments, and you see people going, that's it, it's Madrid. He's talking about trophies. It's Real Madrid. That's where he wants that. But then other people are saying, well, that's great. He's got the right mentality, and he's talking about being captain of the club, isn't he? And that's out of his hands, but something he's always envisaged. Like you said, Mark, there is a bit of, is it a negotiating tactic, which I don't mind, by the way, because if it is a negotiating tactic, that tells me he's not 1.5 feet out the door, if that makes sense as well. If there is a hope that there is a negotiation, like, let's get that done. I suppose the only thing I was thinking around this is, if you think about what we've discussed, it's the only thing we've not related back to the contract. We've all said tonight the games have been quite easier, if that's the right phrase, on paper. You'd have handpicked these fixtures, wouldn't you, for the start of the season? You'd have picked this start, you'd have picked the unfolding. Well, what happens if those three players are thinking that? You said they're enjoying the football, James, which is probably a fair point. What happens if they're thinking, I'm enjoying my football now, let's see when we play some tough games. Let's see if I'm enjoying my football when we've gone away to and Arsenal, if that makes sense, and had some tough fixtures. So time is of the essence, no doubts at all. But yeah, and I do just wonder if that is playing into their thinking at all. Let's just see how it unfolds as tougher days come around.
But that's a very good point. I do. I think I hadn't really considered it that way. You know, what if they want to wait and see? What if they want to see what is the title gone by the end of November? You know, and we don't want to kiss our years away. You know, just top fouring it and small cup runs or whatever. Maybe end of November we're still in it. Then it's a much easier conversation to have with those guys. Also, think the captain's one was the trophy thing's obvious. Every player says they want to win trophies. It's expected. Who doesn't want to win a trophy? Do you think Salah and Van Dijk don't want to win trophies in the end of the year? Of course they do. The big one for me with Trent's thing was the captain's thing, and I think that is the one where I'm really torn on that, because it's nice to hear a guy have that kind of ambition for himself, and essentially kind of shows his love for the club a bit as well. I think it shows kind of the way he thinks about Gerrard and his legacy, and I can be like that and have that same stature around the say. I love that. But I guess the major differences is, Steven Gerrard was Steven Gerrard, and the way he took it from Upia just felt right and meant and the correct move, even at the time, even at his young age. I was all for that one, and Sammy was gracious in the way he allowed that to happen. You're asking Trent you're asking Van Dijk, I suppose, to give up the captaincy as a very clearly superior leader to Trent. There's just no question about it in every aspect. In his performances, in his mannerisms, just in every way. This guy is a colossus. The way he stands there, he's formidable. He's sensational week after week after week. There's never a game where you question Van Dijk's commitment, his concentration, any of those things where, Trent's every other game, that kind of topic arises from pundits, from the Nevilles and Carragers of the world. And, I desperately don't want to lose it. Really don't. And, I could even be won over with the argument of just fucking give him it. If that's all, if that's what it takes, just give him it. But deeper than that, what I would, if I got the chance to sit with him and just talk through this idea with him, I would be saying to him, well, fucking show it then, prove it. Go be the captain, wear your heart on your sleeve, and let's just see a little bit more of guts and glory from you. Let's see a little bit more commitment. Let's see you kind of building the team up. If you want to be captain, be captain. You become captain by being captain. Nobody ever gets made captain before they're captain. You're captain before the decision comes. That's why you get picked to be captain. And I don't think even the biggest Trent fan would say that Trent has been a captain, has he?
No, I suppose it's like you say, sometimes the armband is just a thing, isn't it? Sometimes the armband for certain clubs or certain players, you see it's maybe like the longest serving. But I think you're right. It's a fair point. I mean, I was kind of, I know I said to you guys, yeah, if that gets it done, it's a £150 million asset, you can't let it walk out the door for free, just in terms of the business, the clinical side. But at the same time, Trent is part of the leadership group. I don't debate that. A lot of players on that pitch look to Trent when we're desperate, make something happen. We're pretty desperate here. He's one of the ones you will look to, no doubt about that. But Van Dijk is the leader of that team. There's no doubt. And if you think also that, we've got some unbelievable players and all three are in this category. If someone said to you, of those three, which player gets in any lineup in the world? This is my final question. Which player would it be? Out of those three, the three that have got a year left, who will get you thinking any lineup in the world because of their ability in their position? You've got Trent, you've got VVD, you've got Salah. Who would you say, Jamesy?
I'd say Van Dijk.
Mark?
Yeah, no question. Van Dijk is top, still for me, top 5 player in the world. I think there's absolutely nobody that can live with him. The idea that Saliba is it's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. Van Dijk he's not the best Van Dijk has ever been, but he's still probably as good as any other defender has ever been.
Yeah, and I think that's the key point when you talk about, and we don't know obviously how much the leadership, but it's interesting that Trent chose to mention the captaincy and almost place the importance on it. But Van Dijk is the player that gets in any side in the world, and I don't really see how you can take that armband away from him. But we will have to say, I did lie a bit there, ladies and gents, because I did say that will be the final question for them, but I've got one more for them. Contracts, gents. Do we hear anything about the three by the end of October? Jamesy?
I don't think so.
Oh, crap. We're going into November with nothing heard.
But honestly, yeah, I think November will be a big month, but I think October, nothing.
Mark?
Yeah, I'm probably going to have to agree with Jamesy there. The kind of deadline in my own mind has always been the turn of the year, essentially. You know, once they can start talking to other people, that's that kind of key moment where you've lost a bit of control in how it plays out. So, you know, we've only got October, November, and December essentially till that reality is here. The problem with the question is that we don't know what the hold-up is. You know, we don't know who's holding up which end. You know, it could be what we're saying about the players waiting to see. It could be the club, you know, going in this new kind of analytical direction where it's just simply numbers. It's age and wage and, you know, lines that we are not willing to cross. Or there's so many what-ifs in the whole thing that it's hard to know why they aren't already talking or why it hasn't already happened or worked. So you kind of get left with just kind of gut feeling, and mine is that November, December are huge in this, in these negotiations, and I would be shocked if by the turn of the year we aren't fairly certain on all three in one direction or the other.
Yeah, you have to be, don't you, realistically? So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Some people predicted only one win in October. Some people at the start refused to acknowledge the month of October. And all of us have none of the three signings. So tune in for some more optimism come October. That's how it will be. So we start with a positive, and we probably have you reaching for the asinine by the end of this. So all it really leaves me to say is, Mark, James, for the pessimism, for the realism, but for your analysis, it is much appreciated, gents.
Very welcome, and worth finishing with the note that it was actually quite a good month we just had there.
Yeah, maybe just a good reminder to finish that for September. But there we go, ladies and gents. For September, for Red Alert, for Anfield Index, that was us.